The bitter end for those who dare to despise Chuck Norris. The story begins in a small bar tucked away in the arid expanse of Texas, where hot winds whip up red dust and the sun blazes with an unrelenting ferocity that seems intent on scorching everything in its path. From the outside, the bar is nothing remarkable, just a low, weathered wooden building, its grayed walls stained by time, and the occasional rare rain that fails to wash away the thick layer of dust clinging to its surface. A sign swings creakily above the entrance, bearing the words "The Rusty Spur" in faded, peeling letters, as if someone had scrawled it hastily and left it to fade with the years. But inside, where dim yellow light spills from old hanging lamps, the bar pulses with a strange vitality, an oasis in the desert for wanderers, cowboys, and lost souls seeking refuge from the harshness of life. The air inside that night is thick with the scent of cheap beer, cigarette smoke, and the heavy breath of men who've been there since the sun hung high in the sky. Laughter and rough voices fill the room, punctuated by the occasional coarse curse rising from every corner. But the real focus lies at a wooden table near an old fireplace, where Jack, a hulking figure with broad shoulders and bulging muscles, holds court among his group of friends. Jack isn't a local, but no one dares ask where he's from or why he's ended up in this remote town. He's the kind of man who demands a second glance. Over 6 feet tall, with arms like oak trunks and a chiseled face marked by a long scar running from temple to chin, a testament to brawls he survived. His clothes, a rolled-up shirt smeared with dust and worn jeans, do little to hide the raw power beneath. Yet what truly sets Jack apart is his mouth, always in motion, spinning tales of his exploits in a booming voice that drowns out the faint twang of music from an ancient jukebox in the corner. "I'm telling you, boys," Jack roars, slamming his fist on the table so hard the beer bottles rattle, "there ain't a man in this whole damn state who could take me down." He throws his head back and laughs, revealing a set of uneven white teeth, as if they'd been broken and regrown crookedly. His cronies, a rough bunch with scruffy beards and calloused hands, nod in agreement, though a flicker of doubt dances in some of their eyes. There are regulars at the Rusty Spur. Billy, a wiry mechanic with perpetually grease-stained hands, Red, an aging cowboy with thinning red hair now streaked with gray, and a few others whose names even the barkeep doesn't bother to remember. They cluster around Jack like moths to a flame, drawn by curiosity and a touch of fear toward this giant of a man. Jack raises a fist the size of a grapefruit, veins bulging under sun-darkened skin. "Look at this," he says, his voice dripping with pride. "One punch, and I could smash any fool dumb enough to step up to me." He swings his arm in a mock blow, the air seeming to part before his imagined strength, and his friends erupt in laughter again, a few clapping in approval. But beneath the noise there's a hint of unease, as if they know Jack isn't just talking for fun. He's itching to prove it, and all it'd take is the slightest excuse for this bar to turn into a battleground. Outside, the Texas sky has shifted to the blazing orange of sunset, the last rays slipping through cracks in the wooden walls to paint streaks across the stained floor. The bar isn't crowded, maybe a dozen souls beyond Jack's crew. Behind the counter, the owner, Hank, an old wiry man with white hair and deep-set eyes, wipes glasses in silence, occasionally casting a wary glance at the patrons. He doesn't talk much, but after over 30 years behind that bar, he's seen it all. Drunken stupors, fistfights that left tables in splinters, and worse. Tonight, though, he feels a nagging unease. Maybe it's Jack, the loudmouth stranger who showed up a few days ago and quickly made the Rusty Spur his personal stage. Near the counter, a scrawny man sits alone, clutching an empty beer bottle. Dressed in a tattered leather jacket, his half-closed eyes suggest he's deep in a drunken haze, but every so often, he shoots an irritated glance at Jack. He's not part of Jack's group, and no one knows his name, but the way he grips that bottle hints at a simmering resentment toward the giant blabbering away. In another corner, a young couple huddles close, whispering and giggling, seemingly oblivious to Jack's racket. Even they pause, though, when he slams the table again, their eyes darting toward him. Jack doesn't notice the looks. He's lost in his own world, one where he's the strongest, the unbeatable king. "Back in El Paso," he continues, his tone growing more exaggerated, "I took down 3 guys at once, barehanded. One of them was twice my size, but I hit him once. Bam! And he dropped like a sack of bricks. The others ran off, and there I was, laughing my ass off." He downs his beer in one gulp and hurls the bottle to the floor, shattering it into pieces. The sound startles a few patrons, but Jack just laughs louder, as if it's another trophy to flaunt. Billy, the mechanic, forces a grin. For real, Jack? Three at once? There's a trace of skepticism in his voice, but he quickly looks down when Jack glares at him. You doubting me, Billy? Jack growls, tightening his grip on a fresh bottle Hank slides over. I don't like it when people don't believe me. Want to test me? Billy waves his hands frantically, shaking his head. No, no, I believe you. You're tough as hell. He chuckles nervously, hoping to diffuse the tension, praying Jack doesn't snap right then and there. Red, the old cowboy, stays quiet, nursing a cigarette burned down to the stub. He's seen men like Jack before. Big, loud, always looking to prove something. And he knows they usually bring trouble. But he says nothing, just sighs softly, his cloudy eyes drifting toward the door, as if expecting something. Maybe he's too used to the cycle of nights like this at the Rusty Spur. The liquor flows, the talk gets loud, and then the fists fly. The bar hums along. The jukebox croons a mournful country tune about a man who lost everything to love. But no one's really listening. It's just background noise to the chaos. Hank sets down a freshly wiped glass, his hands trembling slightly. He doesn't like Jack, doesn't like how he's turned the bar into his personal arena, but he's not brave enough to kick him out. Let him dig his own grave, he mutters under his breath, so quiet only he hears it. Jack keeps going. He stands, striding to the center of the room, arms spread wide like a gladiator in a Roman arena. I'll bet you all right now, if anyone's got the guts to challenge me, I'll show him what real strength looks like, he bellows, his voice echoing off the walls. His friends clap, but the applause is weaker this time, as if they're tiring of his act. The scrawny man near the counter grips his bottle tighter, but stays put. The couple lower their heads, pretending not to hear. Only Billy laughs loudly, trying to keep things light. You're unbeatable, Jack. Who dare take you on? But even as Jack stands there, proud as a king among peasants, no one notices the door about to swing open, bringing a cold gust and a figure that will change everything. Lost in his drunken bravado, Jack keeps boasting, unaware that his tale is about to be interrupted, not by words but by a force he can't even fathom. The din inside the Rusty Spur is at its peak, Jack's booming voice drowning out all else as he finishes a wild tale about flattening a giant in El Paso. His fist is still raised, a symbol of his supposed triumph, and his friends laugh raucously, though some are starting to weary of his endless swagger. Outside, darkness has swallowed the Texas landscape, leaving only the faint glimmer of stars in a cloudless sky. A chilly wind sweeps through, carrying the bite of the desert night, slipping through the gaps in the bar's weathered wooden walls. No one pays it any mind, nor do they notice the door trembling slightly under an unseen pressure from beyond. Then, like a sudden slash through the chaos, the wooden door creaks open. The sound is faint, but it cuts through the noise enough to freeze every eye in the place, even those blurred by booze, for a split second. A figure steps inside, slow and deliberate, each footfall seeming to ripple the air. The laughter around Jack fades, then dies completely, as if choked off by an invisible hand. The bar, thick with smoke and clamor, falls into an eerie silence, broken only by the jukebox's hoarse crooning. I lost my heart in the Texas dust. It's Chuck Norris. He stands at the threshold, his presence not towering like Jack's, but radiating a quiet menace that makes people instinctively wary. He wears a simple blue shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, revealing sinewy arms laced with veins like steel cables. His faded jeans hug sturdy legs, and his dusty cowboy boots bear the red grit of the land. But it's his face that holds everyone. Sharp, unyielding, with eyes like razors sweeping the room. Those eyes don't need to snarl or threaten. A single glance is enough to make anyone feel small, vulnerable, like prey under the gaze of a predator. Chuck says nothing. He just stands there, one hand resting lightly on the doorframe, as if steadying himself, though the gesture carries an odd weight, as if he's silently claiming the space without a word. The yellow light from the ceiling casts his shadow across the scarred floor, stretching longer than it should, reaching toward the corner where Jack looms. The atmosphere shifts entirely, from raucous disorder to a tense hush, as if everyone is holding their breath, waiting for something inevitable to unfold. Hank, the wiry barkeep behind the counter, is the first to react. His hands, mid-wipe on a scratched glass, freeze, then set it down with a haste that betrays his usual calm. He nods quickly at Chuck, a small but respectful gesture, like greeting a dignitary, "Hey Buganda Sue," daren't offend. Hank's seen plenty in his 30 years behind that bar. Drunks, brawls, even knife fights. But Chuck Norris is different. He's heard the tales whispered over beers on late nights about a man who could drop a crowd with a glance. Now, with Chuck standing there in the flesh, Hank's earlier unease feels justified. Others in the bar stir too, each in their own way. The scrawny man near the counter, who'd been clutching his empty bottle with quiet resentment, straightens up, his bleary eyes widening. He says nothing, but the tilt of his head shows a mix of curiosity and dread. The young couple in the corner stop whispering, their hands tightening around each other as if seeking comfort from something beyond their grasp. A lone patron, sipping whiskey in silence all night, mutters to his neighbor, "Is that Chuck Norris?" His voice is low, but in the stillness it carries, and a few heads nod in confirmation. But Jack, the giant standing center stage with his fist still aloft, reacts differently. He doesn't flinch or cower like the rest. When Chuck steps in, Jack pauses for a heartbeat, then smirks dismissively, as if the newcomer's arrival is a joke not worth his time. He turns to his crew, his voice still loud though tempered slightly. "What's this? Another chump thinking he's tougher than me?" His laugh rings out, but this time no one joins in. Billy, the mechanic, pales and tugs at Jack's sleeve. "Cut it out, Jack, don't mess around." Jack shrugs him off, stepping forward, eyes locked on Chuck with a defiant glare. Chuck Norris remains silent. He releases the doorframe, taking a few steps into the bar, his boots thudding softly on the wood in a steady rhythm, like a man who's faced every challenge and come out unscathed. He stops a few yards from Jack, his cold eyes meeting the giant's without a flicker. There's no aggression, no taunt, just a calm stare that seems to weigh whether Jack's worth the bother. And that silence, that effortless presence, makes the air in the bar feel suffocating. Jack's crew edges back, no one daring to speak. Red, the old cowboy, stubs out his cigarette, his cloudy eyes glinting with hidden amusement. He's heard of Chuck Norris. Who in Texas hasn't? And he knows Jack's digging his own grave. Billy mumbles something incoherent, hands shaking as he clutches his beer, too scared to move. The other patrons shift too, not fleeing, but retreating, forming an unspoken ring around the two men now at the heart of everyone's focus. Hank shakes his head behind the counter. He knows what's coming, or at least he thinks he does. "Idiot," he whispers, too quiet for anyone to hear. He's seen men like Jack before, big, brash, convinced they're invincible, and he's watched them fall, often to those they least expect. Chuck Norris isn't a regular at the Rusty Spur, but when he shows up, it's not by chance. Hank just hopes his little bar survives the night. Jack, oblivious to the shift, keeps his bravado up. He steps closer, the beer bottle swinging in his hand like a crude weapon, and edges nearer to Chuck. "Who are you that's got everyone shutting up like this?" he snarls, trying to hold his swagger, though his smirk now looks more forced than confident. He doesn't see that Chuck's eyes, unblinking, have already pierced through his tough guy act. In that gaze, there's no anger, no contempt, just a chilling calm, like a storm waiting to break. Chuck tilts his head slightly, the first small move since entering. He doesn't answer Jack's question, doesn't need to. His presence speaks volumes. And in that moment, as the dim light catches his face and his shadow stretches across the floor, the bar senses that this night won't end quietly. Jack might be the biggest man here, but Chuck Norris, he's a legend, and legends don't need to prove a thing. The tension in the Rusty Spur hangs thick as a storm cloud, ready to burst. The jukebox's mournful tune drones on, but no one's listening anymore. Every eye is fixed on the two men in the center of the scarred wooden floor. Jack, the hulking braggart with wild eyes fueled by liquor and rage, and Chuck Norris, the smaller man whose calm exudes a danger that needs no words. They're just a few yards apart now, close enough for the heat of Jack's breath and the ice of Chuck's stare to clash in the air. The silence is deafening, broken only by the faint whistle of wind through the bar's cracked walls, a final warning no one dares voice. Jack takes another step toward Chuck, his heavy boots thudding on the wood, echoing in the stillness. His beer bottle swings lazily in his hand, a makeshift weapon, and the way he cocks his head at Chuck shows he's not backing down. "Heard you're some kind of legend, huh?" he says, his voice loud and gravelly, dragging out the last word with a sneer. "But I don't buy that bullshit people yap about. Just weaklings making up stories to feel big." He laughs, a harsh barking sound, but it falls flat. No one joins in. His crew, Billy, Red, and the rest, stand frozen, their eyes darting between Jack and Chuck like they're watching a train wreck they can't stop. Chuck Norris says nothing. He stands rooted, hands loose at his sides, his posture relaxed yet impenetrable. His sharp eyes lock onto Jack, unblinking, unwavering, as if seeing straight through the giant's bluster to something deeper. That silence isn't submission. It's a warning without words. One Jack, drunk on booze and pride, doesn't grasp. He slams a fist against his chest, the thud ringing out, and bellows, "One punch, and I'll have you flat on your ass in front of everyone. Let's see how much that legend's worth." He raises his massive fist, veins popping under tanned skin, and swings it through the air, a preview of the power he's so sure of. His crew blanches. Billy, the scrawny mechanic, opens his mouth to speak but stops, his trembling hands clutching his beer. He steps back, almost instinctively, eyes wide with dread. "Jack, cool it, man," he whispers, barely audible over the music, but Jack ignores him. He wheels on Billy, glaring. "Shut it! I don't need a coward like you telling me what to do." Billy drops his gaze, silenced, though his hunched shoulders show he knows this is heading somewhere bad. Red, the grizzled cowboy, stays seated, rolling his dead cigarette between his fingers. He doesn't try to stop Jack, nor does he flinch like Billy, but his cloudy eyes gleam with quiet excitement. He's heard the tales of Chuck Norris. Everyone in Texas has, and he knows Jack's about to step into a buzzsaw. He doesn't intervene, though. Let the kid learn the hard way, he thinks, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. The other patrons react too, though none dare speak. The scrawny man near the counter sits up straighter, his drunken haze clearing as he watches Jack taunt Chuck like a madman tempting fate. He grips his bottle tighter, but stays rooted. The young couple in the corner stop giggling, their hands clenching, eyes flicking nervously toward the standoff. A lone whiskey drinker mutters to his neighbor, "This guy's done for." His voice is hushed, but in the charged air, it's a prophecy everyone hears. Hank, behind the counter, shakes his head. He stops wiping glasses, his bony hands resting on the scratched wood as if steadying himself. In over 30 years at the Rusty Spur, he's seen all types. Harmless drunks, hotheads ready to smash everything, but never a fool bold enough to challenge Chuck Norris to his face. "Dumbass," he murmurs, too quiet for anyone to catch. He glances at the rickety tables and chairs, wondering if they'll survive another brawl, though deep down he suspects Chuck won't need to wreck anything to put Jack in his place. Jack keeps pushing. He steps closer, now just a few feet from Chuck, close enough for everyone to see the contrast. Jack, a towering mass of muscle like a moving mountain, and Chuck, smaller but radiating a terrifying calm. "What are you, huh? Standing there staring at me like that?" Jack growls, his voice cracking with agitation. "I've heard you took out a dozen guys, punched through walls, all that crap people make up. I ain't buying it. I'll prove to everyone here you're just an old loudmouth." He slams his bottle to the floor, the glass shattering with a piercing crash, making a few patrons flinch. Chuck Norris raises an eyebrow, the first move he's made since Jack started his tirade, but he stays silent, still as stone, hands relaxed. That slight lift isn't anger or scorn. It's a subtle question, as if wondering just how far Jack's stupidity will take him. And that stillness, that composure, only enrages Jack more. He can't stand being ignored, can't stomach the feeling of being dismissed without a word. "Look at me," Jack roars, his voice bouncing off the walls, overpowering the music. He spreads his arms wide, standing in the middle of the floor like a prize fighter, then jabs a finger at Chuck. "I'm challenging you. Fight me if you're as tough as they say. I'll put you down, and that legend of yours will go up in smoke." He laughs again, but it's hollow now, lacking the bravado of before. His crew retreats further, some pressing against the walls, sensing a storm they don't want to be caught in. Billy tries one last time. "Jack, stop! You don't know what you're doing!" But Jack spins around, snarling, "I told you to shut up! Don't piss me off more!" Billy recoils, stepping back fully, hands over his head like he wants to vanish. Red's smirk widens. his eyes alight as if watching a show. The other patrons edge away, widening the circle around Jack and Chuck, no one daring to come closer or speak up. Chuck Norris finally moves. He tilts his head slightly, eyes still fixed on Jack, and for the first time since entering, he speaks. But it's brief, his voice low and steady. "You sure about that?" The words aren't loud, aren't aggressive, but they hit like thunder in the silence, sending a chill down every spine in the room. It's not a taunt or a threat, just a question, yet it carries a weight that freezes the air. Jack, instead of backing off, laughs louder. "Sure? Damn right I'm sure. I'll smash you to pieces," he bellows, his fist clenching so hard his knuckles crack. He doesn't see Billy's panicked look, Red's sly grin, or Hank's weary shake of the head. All he sees is Chuck Norris standing there, calm as ever, and that calm drives him wilder than anything. He steps forward again, now just a couple feet away, his mind fixed on one thing: taking this man down, right here, right now. The air in the rusty spur is taut as a bowstring, ready to snap. The jukebox's sad country tune hums on, but it's lost to the scene unfolding on the scarred wooden floor, where Jack, the towering braggart with bloodshot eyes and a liquor-fueled fury, faces Chuck Norris, the smaller man whose quiet strength feels like a force of nature. They're mere feet apart now, close enough for Jack's heaving breasts to clash with Chuck's icy gaze. The silence is suffocating, broken only by the faint creak of the wind outside, a prelude to chaos no one dares acknowledge. Jack stands there, his massive fist clenched so tight the knuckles pop, veins bulging under his sun-scorched skin like twisted ropes. His chest rises and falls beneath his dusty shirt, and the smirk on his scarred face twists into something wild, a mix of bravado and madness. He's just challenged Chuck Norris, boasting he'll drop him with one blow, and now, faced with that unshakable silence, he's got no way out. His crew, Billy, Red, and the others, have backed up against the walls, forming an unspoken ring around this makeshift arena. No one speaks, but their eyes betray their nerves, save for Red, whose faint smirk hints at anticipation. Chuck Norris remains a statue. His hands hang loose at his sides, his stance casual but airtight. His piercing eyes stay locked on Jack, unblinking, steady, as if peering past the giant's bravado to something he doesn't even know himself. After his quiet, "You sure about that?" he says nothing more, just tilts his head slightly, a small move that tightens the air even further. It's not a taunt, not a challenge, just an invitation, testing whether Jack will really follow through. Jack can't take that silence. He roars, the sound ripping from his throat like a cornered beast. "You think I'm scared of you?" he bellows, his voice echoing through the bar, drowning out the music and the wind. "I'll show you who I am." He steps closer, now barely a yard from Chuck, the size difference stark. Jack a hulking mass, a moving mountain, and Chuck slighter. Yet his presence renders the gap meaningless. He sucks in a deep breath, chest swelling, then swings his fist at Chuck with every ounce of power his giant frame can muster. The punch is a blur, fast and fierce as a sledgehammer cutting through the air. It whistles sharply, aimed straight for Chuck's face, carrying the force Jack's bragged about, the kind he claims could crush skulls. For a split second, everyone thinks it'll land. His crew holds their breath, Billy clutching his head as if to shield himself, Red raising an eyebrow in curiosity. Hank freezes behind the counter, his bony hands gripping the wood, bracing for wreckage. The scrawny man near the bar gapes, his bottle slipping to shatter unnoticed on the floor. The couple in the corner turn away, too scared to watch. But then no one sees what happens. Time slows for a heartbeat, and when it snaps back, the scene defies belief. Jack, the giant who'd just thrown that devastating punch, is sprawled flat on the floor, his massive body hitting the wood with a resounding thud. He lies there, eyes wide, mouth agape, his face a mask of shock as if he can't fathom what hit him. His right arm, the one that swung, clutches his chest, twitching like it's taken a blow he didn't feel. He mutters something incoherent, his voice a weak rasp, but no one catches it over his ragged gas. Chuck Norris hasn't moved an inch. His hands still hang loose, his posture unchanged, as if Jack's punch never existed. He's not breathing hard, not sweating, not even scratched on that chiseled face. His eyes stay on Jack, not with triumph, but with a calm so cold it chills the room, like this was a minor hiccup not worth his time. No one saw him act. No counterpunch, no dodge, no hint of motion. In a blink, Jack's down, and Chuck's still standing, untouched like a legend from a tall tale made real. The bar erupts in whispers. Billy lets out a tiny, "Oh God," his shaking hands dropping his beer to smash on the floor. He stumbles back, pressing against the wall as if afraid to be caught in the fallout. Red chuckles dryly, the sound cutting through the murmur, and mutters, "Told ya." He stubs out his cigarette, his eyes glinting with satisfaction, like he's seen what he'd hoped for. The scrawny man by the counter stands rooted, jaw slack, staring from Jack on the floor to Chuck in awe. The couple cling tighter, the girl whispering, "What did he do?" It was so fast. Her boyfriend shakes his head, wordless, eyes glued to Chuck. Hank exhales, relieved. He releases the counter, shaking his head in disbelief. "That's it?" he mutters to himself. He'd braced for Jack's punch to smash furniture, turn his bar into rubble, but everything's intact, except Jack, sprawled like a felled ox. He glances at Chuck, a mix of respect and fear in his eyes, grateful this man doesn't wreck things to prove a point. Jack still doesn't get it. He scrambles up, clutching his aching arm, eyes darting in confusion. "What? What just happened?" he mumbles, his voice faint with pain and bewilderment. He looks at his fist, then at Chuck, searching for an answer. But Chuck offers none. He just stands there, eyes cold, expression blank. Jack staggers to his feet, legs trembling under his weight, the swagger gone from his scarred face, replaced by a dazed fear. The bar eases back to life, though no one speaks loudly. The whispers fade, some return to their seats, but eyes keep stealing glances at Chuck Norris. The jukebox's tune grows clearer, as if soothing the strange moment that passed. Billy picks up his beer, hands still shaky, while Red lights a fresh cigarette, smirking faintly. Hank resumes wiping glasses, slow and deliberate, processing what he's seen. It feels normal again, but everyone knows what happened wasn't ordinary. Too quick, too shocking, too unreal. Jack, finally upright on wobbly legs, shoots Chuck one last look. He opens his mouth to speak, then stops, as if realizing words are pointless now. He turns, stumbling toward his crew, but none meet his gaze. His towering frame, once the bar's focal point, now looks small and pitiful. And as he shuffles away, Chuck Norris stands unmoved, like nothing noteworthy just went down, like it's just another day for a living legend. The wooden floor of the rusty spur still trembles faintly from Jack's heavy fall, the once dominant giant now struggling to his feet, legs shaking like they can't bear his bulk. The jukebox's country lament drones on, but the bar's thick silence lingers, heavier than before, as if Jack's failed punch has only deepened the quiet. Yellow light from the ceiling lamp spills down, casting Chuck Norris's shadow across the room. A man still standing motionless, hands relaxed, face unreadable. Before him, Jack clutches his aching arm, eyes wide with shock, mouth gaping as if to speak, but finding no words. The bar, from Jack's crew to the strangers, watches Chuck with a mix of awe and dread, though no one can explain what they've just seen. Chuck Norris, unhurried and unruffled, steps toward the counter. His worn cowboy boots tap the floor in a steady rhythm, a sound calm as a heartbeat from a man who's faced it all. He stops at the bar where Hank, the wiry owner, stands frozen, hands gripping a glass like it's his lifeline. Chuck nods slightly, his voice low and even. "A cold beer. No arrogance, no boast, just a simple request, as if he'd walked in without incident." Hank jolts, nodding fast. "Yes, sir, right away." He fumbles for a glass in the ice chest, hands trembling but steadying, afraid to keep this man waiting. Chuck takes the beer, sipping lightly. White foam spills over the rim, trickling down his hand, but he doesn't care. He turns to Jack, still scrambling up, pale with pain and confusion, and speaks for the first time in full. His voice is soft, steady, without a hint of mockery. "You fell on your own. I didn't even get a chance to move." The words aren't loud, but in the bar's stillness, they strike like lightning, searing into everyone's mind. No one argues, no one questions. The image of Jack crashing down in a blink is still vivid, and Chuck's calm makes it all the more unbelievable. Jack, teetering mid-floor, freezes at the words. He stares at Chuck, his bloodshot eyes swirling with panic and fear. What did you say?" he stammers, voice cracking, but the bravado's gone from his scarred face. He grips his arm, searching for proof Chuck struck him, but finds only an ache he can't place. He turns to his crew, pleading, "You saw it, right? He did something to me?" No one answers. Billy looks down, avoiding Jack's gaze, clutching his beer like a shield. Red smirks, eyes glinting with amusement, but stays silent, lighting a fresh cigarette and blowing smoke upward. The bar stays hushed, but their eyes speak volumes. The scrawny man by the counter, who dropped his bottle in shock, slumps back into his seat, muttering incoherently, hands shaking as if he's seen a miracle. The couple in the corner cling tighter, the girl whispering, "He didn't do anything, did he?" Her boyfriend shakes his head, staring at Chuck, lost for words. Hank sets down his glass, exhaling softly. Only he could pull that off, he murmurs to himself. He's heard Chuck Norris stories, but seeing it firsthand is something else. A sight that leaves him awed and chilled. Jack can't take it anymore. He stumbles toward his crew, but none meet his eyes. Billy steps back, red puffs smoke indifferently, and the others turn away, suddenly engrossed in their drinks. Jack, once the bar's loudmouth king, now looks broken. He bows his head, sweat-soaked hair plastered to his forehead, his broad shoulders trembling, not from pain, but from a fear sinking deep into his bones. He glances at Chuck one last time, but that steady gaze makes him shudder. Without a word, he shuffles to the door, boots dragging on the wood, and the creaky door shuts behind him, leaving an odd silence in its wake. Chuck Norris takes another sip, setting the glass down with a soft clink. He doesn't watch Jack go, doesn't care about the eyes on him. He sits at the counter, hands clasped on the scratch wood, his calm presence easing the bar back from a nightmare's edge. The jukebox tune rises again, and quiet chatter resumes. Billy sits by Red, whispering, "I've never seen anything like that." Red nods, exhaling smoke. "And you won't again." Hank wipes glasses, slow and thoughtful, a rare smile tugging at his lips. From that night, the tale of Jack and Chuck Norris spreads across Texas's dry plains. People recount how Jack, the braggart giant, fell flat before Chuck without a blow seen. Some call it magic, others speed beyond human ken, but none doubt the truth. Chuck Norris doesn't need to prove anything. His name says it all. Jack never returns to the Rusty Spur. Word is he's spotted in another town. Quieter now, his swagger gone. Rumors say he's quit drinking, quit boasting, and when Chuck's name comes up, he just goes silent, eyes distant, reliving a moment he'll never face again. At the Rusty Spur, Chuck Norris becomes a living legend. When the story's retold, Hank nods, adding, "I saw it myself, and I'll never forget." Regulars like Billy and Red mention Jack with a faint smile, but never laugh loud. Deep down, they know they were there, felt that presence only Chuck has. From then on, no one in the bar, or anywhere in Texas, dares scoff at him. "You fell on your own. I didn't even get a chance to move," becomes a lesson, a tale passed down, part of this land's lore. Chuck Norris leaves the Rusty Spur that night, vanishing without a trace beyond the story. But whenever someone enters and sees the chair he sat in, they feel something linger, like his shadow remains, silent, unbeatable, forever etched into that little bar in the Texas dust.